Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Watching these young folks navigate the stormy waters of growing up really takes me back. Lord knows being a teenager in this day and age is like trying to steer a ship through a hurricane without a compass. But when you look at the kids in our favorite town, well, they are carrying burdens that most grown adults would buckle under. It absolutely breaks my heart, but at the same time, it fascinates me to see what is happening with young Rocco and sweet little Scout. These two are going through a genuine trial by fire, and it seems like the very people who should be throwing them a life preserver are the ones accidentally holding their heads underwater. It is a tough pill to swallow, especially when you know their parents love them deeply. But as we all know from our own lives, love alone is not always enough to fix a broken situation. Let us start by looking at Rocco, because that boy has had a tougher road to hoe in the last few months than most folks do in a lifetime. Bless his heart, he is just a kid, but he has been dragged through the mud and the mire in ways that would leave any of us spinning. Pulling the trigger on Cullum was a moment that shattered his innocence into a million pieces. A boy that young should be worrying about passing his math tests and figuring out how to talk to girls, not dealing with the deafening, life-altering sound of a gunshot and the heavy realization that he holds someone's life in his hands. You can just see the weight of the world resting right there on his young shoulders, bowing him down. And if the shooting was not enough to give the boy nightmares for the rest of his natural life, think about the guilt he is carrying because of Jason. Jason, a man who is a legend in that town, stepped up and took the fall for Rocco's mistake. Now, I do not care how tough you think you are, watching a grown man sacrifice his own freedom so you do not have to pay the price for your actions is a heavy, heavy burden for a young conscience to bear. Rocco had to pack up his whole life and go on the run with Britt, living out of suitcases, constantly looking over his shoulder and wondering if he would ever see his home again. That kind of chaos changes a person. It hardens you in some places and leaves you incredibly fragile in others. Now that the dust has somewhat settled and things are supposed to be getting back to normal, Rocco is finding out that you cannot just put the toothpaste back in the tube. He is having a terrible time readjusting to everyday life, and honestly, who could blame him? The saddest part of it all is looking at his parents. Dante and Lulu are good salt-of-the-earth people. They love that boy more than they love drawing breath, and they have the best of intentions. But they are completely missing the mark. They are trying to parent the boy he was before all this happened, not the traumatized young man standing in front of them today. They just cannot see the forest for the trees. They want to fix him, but what Rocco really needs is for someone to just sit in the dark with him and listen. Then you have the absolute tragedy of his social life. It was not that long ago that Rocco, Danny, and Charlotte were thick as thieves. You never saw one without the other two trailing right behind. They were a beautiful little tribe, leaning on each other through all the crazy drama their families brought to the table. But the truth has a funny way of coming out, and when Danny found out that it was actually Rocco who shot Cullum, and that Jason was suffering for it, the whole dynamic shattered like a dropped mirror. Danny simply cannot forgive Rocco for letting Jason take the blame. That is a mighty strong grudge for a young man to hold, but Danny has a lot of fire in him. And Charlotte, well, she drew her line in the sand and stood firmly by Danny's side. Just like that, Rocco was left out in the cold, completely alienated from the only friends who truly understood his world. While Rocco is drowning in all this isolation, we have got Sweet Scout facing her own brand of heartbreak on the other side of town. It feels like she blossomed into a teenager overnight, growing up faster than a weed in a summer garden. Navigating those teenage years is confusing enough for a young lady with all the shifting emotions and new challenges, but Scout is doing it with a father who is completely blind to her pain. Drew is walking around with blinders on, so wrapped up in his personal vendettas and his endless feuds that he is neglecting the most precious thing in his life. He is like a dog with a bone, refusing to let go of his anger, and in the process, he is pushing his daughter right away. The most heartbreaking part of Scout's situation is how Drew is handling her relationship with her brother. Drew has decided to keep Scout away from Danny, and that is just a crying shame. Danny is the brother she absolutely adores, the one piece of family stability she desperately craves right now, and Drew is standing in the way because of his own pride and stubbornness. You can see the sorrow in that girl's eyes. She is living in a house where she feels completely invisible. Her father is physically there, but emotionally, he might as well be on the moon. She is hurting, she is lonely, and she is crying out for attention, but her dad is too busy fighting ghosts to notice his daughter's tears. But here's where the story takes a turn that just warms my old heart, because life has a funny way of providing exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. Out of all this mess, Rocco and Scout have found each other. It makes perfect sense when you really sit back and think about it. You look at Danny and Charlotte, and those two are the wild ones. They are adventurous, they are reckless, and they tend to jump feet first without ever looking to see how deep the water is. But Rocco and Scout, they have always been the cautious ones. They are the thinkers, the ones who stand back and observe, the ones who feel things deeply and quietly. That shared temperament naturally drew them together when the rest of their world started falling apart. Now they have something even more profound binding them together. The shared trauma of feeling completely abandoned by the adults who are supposed to protect them. They are both looking at their parents and realizing that the grown-ups do not have all the answers. In fact, the grown-ups are the ones making the biggest messes. Neither Rocco nor Scout feels like they can talk to their folks. They feel misunderstood, unheard, and swept under the rug. When you are a teenager carrying that kind of emotional pain, you desperately need a safe harbor in the storm. You need a place where you can just breathe without someone judging you or trying to fix you. And they have found that safe harbor in each other. It is a beautiful, quiet kind of connection. They do not have to explain their complicated family histories or justify their feelings because they both just get it. When Rocco is feeling the crushing weight of his guilt, Scout does not lecture him. She just sits beside him. When Scout is crying over missing her brother and feeling invisible to her dad, Rocco does not offer empty platitudes. He just offers a shoulder to lean on. They have created this wonderful little sanctuary for themselves away from the noise and the expectations of poor Charles. It is a testament to the resilience of youth, finding light in the darkest of places. Now, the big question on my mind, and I am sure it is on yours too, is where exactly this relationship is heading. The history of their families makes it a fascinating puzzle to piece together. You have to remember the days when Dante and Sam were together. During that time, Rocco and Scout were being raised under the same roof. They were essentially brought up to view each other as siblings, sharing meals, sharing holidays, and building that built-in family foundation. Because of that deep-rooted history, this new bond of theirs could very well blossom into an incredibly strong, protective brother-sister dynamic. They might just become the chosen family that neither of them currently has at home. On the flip side of that coin, we have to acknowledge the reality of the situation. Rocco and Scout do not share a single drop of blood. They are two teenagers spending a lot of time alone, sharing their deepest, darkest secrets, and relying entirely on each other for emotional support. That is the exact recipe for first love. Out of the ashes of their broken family dynamics, a beautiful little flower of a teenage romance might just be sprouting. Sometimes the strongest romantic relationships are born out of a deep, underlying friendship and a mutual understanding of each other's pain. It would certainly add a whole new layer of drama to the canvas, especially when their parents finally wake up and realize what has been happening right under their noses. I honestly do not know which direction I want it to go, but I am thoroughly enjoying watching it unfold. It is a reminder that even when the adults are making an absolute mess of things, the kids have a way of finding their own path to healing. They are surviving, and they are doing it together. It gives you a little bit of hope, does it not? I would absolutely love to hear what all of you think about this. Do you see Rocco and Scout remaining close friends, holding on to that sibling bond they were raised with? Or do you think we are witnessing the very beginning of Port Charles' next great love story? Let me know your thoughts, because I could talk about these two all day long.